Well, good morning. It's Friday, June 4th. And we are here for our morning devotion, again using N.T. Wright's Hebrews for Everyone. Today's passage comes from chapter 9, verses 23 to 28. That's why it was necessary for the copies of the heavenly object to be purified in this way, while the heavenly things themselves will require better sacrifices than these. For this Messiah did not enter into sanctuary made by human hands, the copy and pattern of the heavenly one, but into heavenly one itself, where he now appears in God's presence on our behalf. Nor did he intend to offer himself over and over again, in the same way as a high priest goes into sanctuary year after year with blood that isn't his own. Had that been the case, he would have had to suffer repeatedly since the foundations of the world. Instead, he appeared once at the close of the age to put away sin by the sacrifice of his own self. Furthermore, just as it had laid down the humans have to die once, and after judgment comes, so the Messiah, having been offered once for all to take away the sins of the world, will appear a second time. This will no longer have anything to do with sin. It will be in order to save those who have eagerly awaited him. It was such a great day, she said. I'd really like to do it all over again. We were looking at photographs 2 weeks after the wedding. All their friends and relatives had been there. The sun had shone. The music was magnificent. The reception had been grand. The speeches good. The late night party enormously fun. The sort of day that comes to most of us only once in a lifetime. That, of course, is the point. You don't get married every year, every month, every week. The reason you have such a big party is precisely that it's supposed to happen once and once only. Some events mean what they mean precisely because they are a one-off. To repeat them would be to show that you haven't understood or that somehow it hadn't worked the first time. And so what the writer of Hebrews and what N.T. Wright are saying is actually really, really simple. Jesus died once and only had to die once for the forgiveness of sins and to show God's love. And so he goes back to the high priest who has to go into the temple, has to go into the holiest holies every year to make that sacrifice. And in fact, even outside of that one time a year, they had to make sacrifices every day. And so the writer is saying, and N.T. Wright is saying, this event was so wonderful, so awe-inspiring. Think of he uses the analogy of a wedding. It happens once. And it's a grand party. And, doesn't always happen once for everybody, but it should be that one event. And he's saying that Jesus' one event, his death, was the ultimate party that brought the age of the Messiah into reality. And that he didn't have to do it again and again and again and again. He only had to die once to bring that new covenant, which is written on our hearts, to be a reality that we live in. Imagine if we had to go to the temple every day to sacrifice, or we had to have the high priest for us sacrifice all the time for us. So what's the purpose of that? What's the point of that? It really means nothing. It had its place, it had its moments. But with God, there was that better sacrifice, the sacrifice of his son Jesus. And he only had to die once, just once, to cover our sins and no longer need to make sacrifice. And he does mention that the Messiah will come again, absolutely will come again, but has nothing to do with sins. Has to come to create that new heaven and new earth. And I'm sure we'll cover that later. Go forth this day in the peace and the love of Christ. Amen.